Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony, he's Ron, and together we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the corporate media. We should start, Ron. I just want to let you know that I'm going to be covering lots of subjects today. I'm going to be doing a bit from here and a bit from there and a bit from here and a bit from there. And if you feel like I'm rambling or anything, I just want you to know that I'm actually doing a weave.
The weave.
Okay?
You're doing the Trump weave.
It's kind of my weave. You know,
okay.
I've been weaving long before that guy started weaving. So I just thought we'd start with that.
Except the Trump weaves have absolutely nothing to do with the subject that you're addressing, though. So I don't know if you want to do that kind of a weave. No.
I'm just really upset about Georgia. Oh, no, sorry. That wasn't the question, was it? The question was about Google. All right, we'll come to that in just a minute. Let's start, though, by talking about the sundowning of Donald Trump, because this is there are two issues at play here, and it's very interesting. There's the fact that he is obviously mentally ill, and the mental health covers the narcissistic personality disorder, the kind of psychopathic tendencies, him just being a very unwell, unhinged individual. But then on the other side, which doesn't really fall under the mental health category, just under health generally, is he clearly is suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia that is causing him to sundown, as is demonstrated in this town hall that we're about to look at. Just kind of tell us how you dealt with this, because a lot of people have been reposting this, and it's really the biggest story of the week is that how Trump basically decided to not take any questions at the end of the town hall because I think his brain had just had enough, and he just wanted to stand for 39 minutes and listen to some tunes.
I also think he's on drugs. And I base that on the fact that, I was a criminal lawyer for 29 years. So doing criminal defense. So what that means is I had people in my office every day that were on drugs, on every kind of drug you can imagine. I mean, I'm talking about the people I represented, their family members, girlfriends, boyfriends. So I'm pretty familiar with recognizing when somebody's on something, and so I don't base my opinion that he's on something on no experience. It's a lifetime of experience of being around drug addicts. So that's one thing that, we didn't even weave into this, but yeah, I mean, look, just 2 weeks ago, Anthony, 2 weeks ago on the show, we talked about this. We said that Trump is much worse now than he was a month ago, and worse than he was 6 months ago, and much worse than he was a year ago, that he is circling the drain. And, that really culminated in a sundowning type moment at this town hall event with Kristi Noem. Now, there's so many layers to this. I mean, first, let's take the Kristi Noem angle. This was her rehab tour event. Like, ever since the puppy stuff, she's been persona non grata. She's toxic. No one will go near her. They don't want her at the events. Trump didn't want her at, but this is her chance to get back into mainstream good graces. Let's forget about all that and move on. So she hosts this event, and she flies all the way from South Dakota to Pennsylvania to do this town hall for Trump. And there was supposed to be an hour of questions and answers from the audience. Instead, what it was 32 minutes they went before they stopped it and stopped taking questions. And most of that 32 minutes was Kristi Noem talking, because Trump was out of it. He was clearly out of it. There was something wrong with him. And then people started passing out because it was stifling hot in the building. I don't know if they didn't want to turn the air on, or they had the heat on too high, or they had too many people in the smaller venue. I don't know what the reason was, but people were passing out, and they were begging, they were yelling, turn on the air, turn on the air. You could hear him saying that. So Trump, I think, got annoyed about that he kept having to stop as, EMTs are coming to haul people out. So then he just said, that's it. I'm not doing any more questions. And then Noem doesn't know what to do. And she's like, well, let's play some music, almost like playing somebody off. And then they're playing the first song, and you can hear Trump in the mic going, they're not leaving. They're not leaving. So I think Trump thought everyone was going to leave. They were going to take people out.
He thought it was like a way to get rid of people.
Yeah.
But that's so interesting.
And so they just kept, but no one was leaving because nobody knew what to do. They all came there. These people wait 5-6 hours outside to get into these events. They have to go through the magnetometers. So they wait all day for this big moment. And after 32 minutes, he wants them to leave. And so, they're playing music. People don't know what to do. They don't know what the hell's going on. He's just standing up there, like kind of half dancing, half swaying to the music. And they played music for 30 minutes. It was just absolutely bizarre.
Do you remember last week when we when we predicted that some shit was going to go down between now and the election? Like, we were like, if you think that's bad, it's going to get a whole lot worse. Yeah. I mean, that was a town hall, right? There is no precedent for this, for where one candidate who is a former president, imagine if George Bush had done this. I'm talking about Bush Sr., right? In the middle of a town hall goes, you know something? We don't need any questions. Who wants to hear questions? Let's listen to Ave Maria instead. I mean, it's so weird.
And it was, there's so many layers. Is because the other part is like, I immediately plugged into my right-wing friends and people with the Trump campaign to see how they were going to spin this. Cause I said immediately, like, they're going to have to spin this somehow. And what really told you that there was something serious going on medically was that they were just over the top with their spin.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like the normal, like, oh, the old man killed it, he did a great job. They were like acting like this was a biblical moment. This was the greatest event ever. This was incredible. It was spiritual. I mean, all the usual suspects, Stephen Miller, Steve Chung, Jason Miller, were all pumping out this nonsense. And that tells you right there, and it was done in a very coordinated way. It was done immediately.
Yeah.
And over the top. That tells you that they knew that this was a big problem and they needed to spin this somehow right away.
But this is something that actually happens in families. And, a campaign team, especially one who's been together a long time, is like a extended family, whereby if one person is ill, and it happens with dementia patients in families all the time, especially early in diagnosis, when people don't really want to admit that it's happening, and you're not sure, are they, aren't they? And some people don't want to hear it, because, these are human reactions to a family member who is unwell. And so you start to cover for each other and pretend that everything is good. And that's what I felt was happening there. And even Kristi Noem on the stage was talking to Donald Trump like he was a patient in a secure unit, where she was saying, okay, so what do you want to do now? Do you want to listen to some music? Okay, we'll put the music on then. I mean, it was really bizarre. It was like he was in a retirement home and he'd wandered out of his room again and was found like out front on the grass in his pajamas, and they'd walked him back in and tried to soothe him with Ave Maria. I mean, that's how it felt to me. Yeah, very odd. Let me just show this quick clip.
Playing nurse.
Yeah, she was playing nurse. Check out the faces of the people around. I don't know if you've seen on Instagram, there's these viral memes going on of Frankie Valli, who's just made a comeback to barely. And they've been wheeling him on with the Four Seasons, or whoever are playing the Four Seasons, and he's having to sing all of his hits. Grease is the word, but he doesn't open his mouth. He just stands very still, does this to a click track. And it's and that really reminded me of this situation here, where it's like this guy is so past his sell-by date. He should not be doing this. It is inhumane to put someone like Donald Trump at this stage of his life through this campaign. I'm not supporting him with my language. I'm just saying that why has his family not stepped in? Why are people not stepped up?
Because these people are all in the gravy. Look, we've talked about this before. We talked about this before. Like, none of Donald Trump elevates all of these misfits and losers and weirdos higher than in politics than they will ever be elevated by anybody else. When Trump exits the stage, whenever that is, exits the scene, these people are all going to go largely back to irrelevance. Like your Charlie Kirks, your Donald Trump Juniors, all these grifting influencers that they all think that they're going to be like assistant secretary of the Navy. They're going to be the press secretary for DHS. They're going to be a spokesman or a communications person. They all believe that they're going to get ambassadorships, And many of them are going to get those positions. But the point is with Donald Trump out and a normal Republican in there, these people are nothing. They'll go back to obscurity. Stephen Miller, who the hell's going to hire Stephen Miller? Like, nobody wants him around. Only Donald Trump wants these misfits around. And so he's their meal ticket. So they have to try and defend him somehow. You know, the other funny part, to go back to that clip, is like Noam is trying to like get him to do something. Like, you could see her. She's like, clap your hands, Donald. Hey, let's do this. Hey, let's look at that person over there. Let's wave. Let's dance now. Like, he's just standing there like a clown, like a fool. And she's just trying to figure some way out of this mess. You can just tell.
It also shows that he has kind of lost control, even to know how to put on a show. You know, he's always been a showman. He's always had that kind of P.T. Barnum aspect to him, where he knows what flies and what sells and what's going to be a hit. And yet in this moment, he couldn't work out how to get rid of an audience, how to ask people to leave. He just thought playing music loudly, especially songs that nobody likes, is the way it's going to go. And it just didn't work out for him. And to me, that really is a sign that when his kind of core energy, which is the showmanship, once that starts to slide, then he's really lost that aspect of his character.
That's a really good point. In 2016, he really figured out how to put together this act, this reality TV show packaged candidate of this package of stuff and stories and insults and all of that. And no one had ever heard anything like that before from a serious political candidate. All the insults, the misogyny, the sexism, the racism. And, it brought out from under rocks and crevices a lot of really sick, twisted, bad people who have never been involved in politics before and showed up at Trump rallies. And it became this revolting, Hillary called it the deplorables, this revolting traveling roadshow. And Trump was quite good at it, to give him his due. I mean, if that's what you wanted to create, he created it better than anyone else. But he has lost that. He is now boring. That's why people now leave his rallies. They walk out. They're like, they've heard all these old tired stories 1,000 times. He has nothing new. He has nothing funny to say that they haven't heard a million times. He still gets them to show up, but they're not showing up like they used to.
But isn't that a characteristic of the dementia, is where you default to the stories that you've told time and time again?
Yeah.
And that actually you can't engage in the present. You can only reference the past. I mean, I appreciate that every patient is different. But with him, because what's so weird is sometimes he's he's almost slumped, and then something will trigger him and he'll get really fired up about a story, which is something he's told 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
And then he'll go back to the slump again. And to me, this again is just, look, I'm not a physician, so I'm not trying to diagnose him. But there are plenty of physicians who have diagnosed him from afar. There's enough material, there's enough video evidence, there's enough recordings now to be able to put together a pretty consistent evaluation of him, both his mental, his physical health, and it's important because as the commander-in-chief potentially, he needs to be smart and fit, otherwise we get J.D. Vance. And that is a very dangerous, even more dangerous scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also just a lot of old people, or the people that are really older like that. It's not only dementia patients too. This was a criticism of Joe Biden that a lot of people had, that I had, which was, he was constantly telling these stories from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And it's like, literally nobody wants to hear these stories anymore. Like, we've heard them all 1,000,000 times. And I would cringe every time he'd start telling his corn pop stories and, stories about, this guy back on the block in 1954, It's just, it's what people that are very old do. And that's when it's time for them to exit the stage. But,
which
Republicans have no plan B.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to come back to Trump a little bit later because obviously there's been a few examples of this weirdness over this last week, which we're going to look at. But first, let's go to Texas because, of course, the senator race is wide open. Colin Allred and everybody's favorite, Ted Cruz. Cruz is, we were discussing just before the show how unpopular Cruz is. He's so unpopular, even his beard does not want to stay attached to him. Have you noticed that? It looks like it's peeling off.
Very wispy. Yeah.
Very wispy. The whole thing is wrong. Anyway, Colin Allred has really, he is an exceptional, I'll leave this to you to explain, but I think he's an exceptional candidate, and he really took Ted Cruz down to Chinatown, didn't he?
Yeah. Before we get to Ted, let's talk about Allred then for a second, because, Beto O'Rourke ran against Ted 6 years ago and almost beat him. But, O'Rourke is a liberal. He's pretty progressive. He said a lot of things about guns that weren't real popular in Texas. And Allred is not. Allred is a centrist. He is a middle of the road, moderate Democrat, former NFL linebacker, great biography, all that. And so he is the right candidate for Texas, for Democrats to run statewide in Texas. You can't just run anybody, and you can't run a progressive and expect to win Texas. And the demographics of Texas has changed a lot. A lot of people have moved in from up north, from California, have moved into Texas.
Yeah.
So the demographics have changed, and Ted is a very unpopular guy. And so if you'd have told me a year ago, though, because the control of the Senate right now is looking like it's going to come down to Montana and Texas, and Democrats have to win one of those two, it's looking like, to hold the Senate. And if you'd have told me a year ago that John Tester in Montana was probably going to lose, and Ted Cruz was also probably going to lose, and Democrats could, I'm not going to say probably, but could lose, I would not have believed you. I would have said, no, Tester's going to win and Cruz is going to win big. But here we are where Tester is consistently down 3-4 in the polls, may lose his seat. But this race with Cruz is an absolute dead heat. He's getting outspent by a lot, which he's complaining about every single day, that Mitch McConnell will not help him. Mitch McConnell is sitting on a $400 million war chest. He will not spend any of it on either Ted Cruz's race or Kari Lake's race. And both of them are screaming about it because he doesn't like either one of them. And so he's putting his money elsewhere. And so Ted absolutely could lose this race. It's bizarre because, Trump could win Texas by 6-7 points or more. And Ted could lose it, which shows you really how unpopular Ted is.
I think Ted's time is up, isn't it? That's how it feels. And I think I'm even talking about Republicans in Texas probably feel that Ted's time is up. And that's why Colin Allred's been so clever with his language. And the clip we're going to show is from a TV debate where, I could show the whole debate. I really thought the effort was exceptional. But in this clip, he really comes into his own. Here it is.
Sure. You get 60 seconds, sir.
Sure. Well, I want to thank y'all for moderating. You did an excellent job. I want to thank Senator Cruz for a spirited debate. Listen, we're all Texans. My idol, John Lewis, used to say that we might have come here on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. We're all Americans, and we're all Texans. We need a leader who will bring us together around our shared values. That's what I've tried to do in my 6 years in Congress. That's the exact opposite of what Senator Cruz has done. Whatever he says tonight, you've seen it for 12 years. He's been one of the most divisive senators in the entire country. If you don't like how things are going in Washington right now, well, you know what? He is singularly responsible for it. He has introduced this new kind of angertainment where you just get people upset and then you podcast about it and you write a book about it and you make some money on it. But you're not actually there when people need you, like when the lights went out. When 30 million Texans were relying on a senator to spring into action, he went to Cancun. That's who he is. If you give me the chance to be your United States Senator, I'll never abandon you. And I'm asking for your vote and for your support in this election.
Congressman.
He has a lot of poise. That was his closing minute statement. During the debate, he was really giving as good as he got. And he, in fact, was calling Ted Cruz a liar multiple times. And I'm really pleased about that. Maybe he'd seen some of our previous episodes because this needs to be done more. And Joe Biden started doing it now about Donald Trump, actually using the words, that's a lie, or he's a liar. The word liar used to be very libelous, didn't it? People would sue over being called a liar. But now I'm pleased that it's kind of become part of regular vernacular.
I like that clip also because I feel like I had a hand in facilitating it. And those are always my favorite clips. See, Adam Frisch was the one who coined the angertainment term in his first debate with Lauren Boebert that hardly anybody watched. It was 2 years ago. And he used that line. He came up with that line, angertainment, to describe her. And I thought that's just a brilliant way of summarizing what these MAGA, narcissistic, attention-seeking people like Boebert, Cruz, Luna, Gates, they're just about creating anger and divisiveness, entertainment to get themselves on Fox and Newsmax and all of and get their hits on social media. They're not interested in governing or policy. And so I clipped that and put it out, and it went really viral, that line, and I've used that line ever since a lot. And the All Red people follow me on social media, campaign people. And, to hear him use that line was very cool to describe Ted, because he's right. Ted was one of the OG angertainment. You could say he started it. He was probably the first guy that kind of went with this playbook where you're turning these hateful, divisive lines into podcasts and TV segments. I mean, he pioneered it. You could maybe go back to Newt Gingrich before him or Rush Limbaugh, but Ted, and certainly in the Senate, has mastered the art of angertainment. And so I thought that was a great line. I thought there were two other really good lines where he talked about Ted Cruz hiding in the broom closet during January 6th. I thought was, after he instigated the whole thing, helped instigate the whole thing, was really good too. So I thought he had quite a few really. I thought his pointing out that Ted was so very anti-choice on abortion, I thought was really good points too. So I thought on the plus side that was good. Let's take the other side, which is the line that Ted made a big deal out of was he challenged All Red on trans athletes in women's sports, and All Red sort of gave a wishy-washy answer about that. And that was the big thing that the Cruz campaign highlighted after. And I've seen them do this many times before on this issue of trans athletes playing women's sports. This is one of their favorite hot button culture issues. And to me, there's just an easy way for Democratic candidates to deal with this issue, but I've not seen anybody actually do this yet. But the easy response to this is just very simple. Look, it's up to sports leagues. It's not up to a senator to decide what a local little league or a basketball league or a state high school league or the Olympic committee. This is up to the NCAA. This is up to them. Let the sports leagues make their own rules on eligibility, on playing, on how many referees, on everything. It is not up to a senator or a politician to get involved in sports. To me, that's just the easy answer, but I've yet to hear a Democrat sort of answer it that way.
Yeah, it's a difficult subject.
It is.
And people tend, and this has happened a lot during this campaign, even with Kamala Harris, instead of actually answering it, they kind of do a dance to not answer it.
Yeah.
And it's annoying, because what we need people who have the confidence and the eloquence to actually answer these things head on, even if it's uncomfortable and even if it's not going to please everybody. It's just, it's a better way to do
I'm not going to tell a girls softball league in Montana who can play and who not from the United States Senate. That's not really my job. That's not my role. That's not government's role. It's a simple answer, but instead they try and sort of, I don't know, it's an issue Republicans love to bring up because it divides Democrats. Democrats are divided on this issue. I can tell you.
But what you're describing is actually a little bit like the abortion argument. And as Tim Walz would say, mind your business, right? Yeah. It's like this should be about a woman and her doctor. It's not about getting diktat from the state or from or from the federal government.
Yeah, but watching Democrats try and deal with the trans issue in sports
Yeah.
is a lot like watching Republicans try and deal with the abortion issue right now, where they're trying to they're doing a weave, and they don't have to. To me, like the correct and easy response is what I said. I think
it's also a real minority issue in both senses of the term, because there's not that many trans athletes who are seeking to compete. So it's
like 0.001%. Yeah.
And so you know, it's become a huge kind of hot button national talking point. Most people who are having these conversations have never met a trans person. They don't know anything about transgenderism. They just see them as the latest target in you know, and this is what happens every decade. There's a new victim, and it's very frustrating. Talking of which, let's take a look at this debate about the battle for the black vote, is how you describe it, with Kamala Harris. She went on a podcast to talk about masculinity and machismo and the way that, you know, Donald Trump presents himself. Maybe you can set this up for us just before I play the clip.
I mean, the Trump campaign, I think, figured out correctly 6-7 months ago that they were going to get killed with women voters, you know, especially you look at the numbers, they're just staggering. They're worse. You know, Trump did fairly well with white women voters back in 2016, did fairly, and that's why he won, to be honest with you. He did fairly well. He did very badly in 2020, and he's doing even worse now. Yeah. And of course, black women are like 95% against him. He knows he has absolutely no chance with black women, and he's getting creamed with white women, and especially white women with college, who went to college. Oh my God, the numbers are just staggering. He's losing by like 30 points among white women with college. White women without college, he's about even. It's about 50-50. So he actually does well with white women, no college. So there's some, when you break down the numbers, it's a little strange. But going back to the campaign strategy, so they knew that was going to go very badly for them. So their whole strategy has been, of course, to boost turnout among men. But, you know, the problem is that's only going to get you so far. So the Trump campaign came up with the strategy that they were going to make a heavy play for black men. And they've been doing this for like 6 or 7 months. They've brought, you notice they highlight black men at rallies. They give them prominent speaking positions. They have prominent surrogate roles. The small handful of black men supporting Trump are very much highlighted by the campaign and in ads and all of that. And, you know, they think that, and they've also used the mugshot stuff, the sneakers, all of this stuff.
It's so
they think
naive.
That is going to appeal to black male voters because it shows that Trump is a gangster and all that kind of stuff.
Who came up with that? Stephen Miller? I mean, that really, because it's so racist.
Suspects. It's very racist.
It's so racist.
But I thought that sort of the Harris campaign and before that the Biden campaign sort of ignored what was happening and didn't address it, because I didn't think that they really saw that there was a problem. But I think now they do. They're starting to see that Trump is peeling off, not necessarily with that, but with other things, a slice of black male voters, certainly bigger than what he got before. And so Harris went on Charlemagne the God, which is he has a big audience of black men who also don't necessarily aren't heavily involved in the political process. And she went on the show and she took that head on, and she just said, look at what this man is doing. He's trying to sell you these things as the reason why he connects with you. But there is nothing about Donald Trump that is in the best interests of black men. Nothing about his history, his past, or his policies. So I think she just did a really, really good job in this appearance of taking that on. And I think she's got to keep doing this.
Let's take a look.
And again, you know, here's Charlemagne. One of the things that I think is really ironic, but at play. Donald Trump, through his way of trying to name call and demean and divide, tries to project as though those things are a sign of strength, when in fact the man is really quite weak. He's weak. It's a sign of weakness that you want to please dictators and seek their flattery and favor. It's a sign of weakness that you would demean America's military and America's service members. It's a sign of weakness that you don't have the courage to stand up for the Constitution of the United States and the principles upon which it stands. This man is weak and he is unfit.
I'm pleased also to hear the unfit word, because it formed the title of the brilliant documentary about his mental health that came out a couple of years ago, and the new documentary, the follow-up, Untruth, makes a great Saturday night viewing. But back to the point here, I don't think that any of these tricks that Trump is trying to pull with his very ridiculous analysis of black culture, it's not going to make any dent in the voting whatsoever. I think, people of color have probably already made up their mind, hopefully. And, there's always a few, and it's very confusing to understand why black men and black women would even be drawn to Donald Trump, considering the civil rights history in America. But there are always anomalies. But ultimately, I believe that women and people of color and minorities and LGBTQ plus communities, they're going to be coming out to vote in droves, and they will not be voting for him.
Yeah, well, that's true. And, we've seen Republicans in the past make a play for the black vote. George W. tried in 2000. We've seen it before, and sometimes they actually do okay in the polls, but then those voters always come home to the Democrats. So it has never panned out on election day. Sometimes it pans out in polls, but not on election day. So I tend to agree with you that I think those voters are going to come home, and Trump's not going to do as well with black men as maybe his polls are showing right now, which shows him getting like 20% or something of them, which is not insignificant for a white male Republican presidential candidate to get 20% of the black male vote. If he gets that, that's a problem. But I agree with you. I don't think he's going to. And by the way, in that interview, so she did take on the sneakers issue and stuff. It wasn't in that clip, but she did talk about that. She also, I thought, made a very compelling case that, like, how Donald Trump has been against, search and seizure, been for stop and frisk, always sides with the police all the time in these civil rights cases, wanting to gas protesters in the George Floyd stuff. So, yeah, I mean, Trump's trying to have it both ways here, where he wants to, with his white audiences, he wants to talk up the police and denounce the protests, and yet he still wants the black vote, so and he's trying to win that with sneakers.
Yeah, well, it's as if the Central Park 5 issue didn't happen, or it's as if the birtherism story didn't happen. I mean, Donald Trump laid his cards on the table decades ago as to who he was, not to mention his father and the racism and not renting buildings to people of color. I mean, you can't, a leopard doesn't change their spots. And so he can squeal all he likes about sneakers, but it ain't going to change who he is.
Yep. The other crazy thing is, I heard that somebody, I think it was Hannity, one of the right-wing hosts, said that because she also talked about on his podcast legalizing marijuana nationwide.
Yes.
National legalization of marijuana. And one of the Fox hosts said, no, it was Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends. He said this morning, well, that clearly shows that she's just pandering to the white male vote. So what he's saying is, like, only black male vote. Only black men want to smoke weed, by her saying she wants legalization of marijuana, that she's just talking to black men, because they're the only ones who smoke marijuana. Like, yeah, you got to be crazy. I'm in a state that's overwhelmingly white, and there's marijuana dispensaries everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. That's just nuts.
She's also agreed to go on Fox to do an interview with Brett Baier, and Donald Trump has been canceling interviews left, right
after
and
this show.
Right.
By the way.
Yeah.
An hour and a half from now. Yeah.
Right. So this is very interesting because a lot of the backlash has come that, the show's going to be edited, and Brett Baier basically kind of came out and he kind of tried to set the record straight because someone posted, "You already said it would be edited, which is true. Will the full interview transcript be released?" And he said, "I never said it would be edited. I said it would be taped as live before my show. You will see the whole interview on Special Report, unedited, uninterrupted, unchanged. You can have the transcript too if you want. It will air. Thanks." I mean, he's not taking any prisoners, is he? I mean, and, Brett Baier he's done the right thing a few times now, hasn't he? He's basically stood up to this MAGA propaganda.
He's up and down. He's push-pull, It's funny because when he first announced this on Monday morning, I'm going to be interviewing Harris on Wednesday, my first reaction was, MAGA is going to go nuts. You would think like they'd be happy, like, oh, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Like he'll roast her on Fox, one of our guys, No, I knew because I knew all their conspiracies about Fox, and they hate Bear because Bear is like the closest thing that Fox has to a normal journalist.
Yeah.
Like after Chris Wallace got fired,
right.
Like Chris Wallace was the guy, but now he's gone. So it's pretty much just Bear is the only one left that's like a real journalist. And he has, and probably Trump's worst interview of this election cycle was with Brett Baier last year, where Brett Baier just destroyed him. Only destroyed him by asking specific policy questions.
Yeah, well,
and not letting him ramble.
He just did a normal interview.
He did a normal interview.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, but the way they see it, that was a setup, and Baier hates Trump, and he's a closet liberal and all this kind of stuff, which is nonsense. So when he made that announcement, I paid very close attention to the replies on his post. He got in 24 hours, he got 33,000 replies in 24 hours on Twitter, and they were all right wingers, and they were all yelling and screaming at him, saying, you better be tough, you better. So. And you see that's just one of Bear was trying to like respond to all their conspiracies. You're going to give the questions in advance. She's going to wear an earpiece. You're going to edit it, and he's trying to slap down like the whack-a-mole game that we usually play with these people, knocking down their conspiracies. And it was entertaining for me to watch him having to do that over the last 24 hours, but it will certainly make it for a more interesting interview. Because how will he react to all of that? To all of these right-winger people, many of whom are Fox audience members who are saying, we don't like you, we don't trust you, and we think you're going to do a shitty interview. Will that make him go extra hard at Harris? I think he's not going to be very friendly, that's for sure.
But it kind of doesn't matter because she can handle herself. And, we've got to stop allowing these circus events to be where the headlines are. The headlines need to be about protecting America from the fall of democracy and the rise of fascism. For me, that's where it starts and where it ends. This is a special election. It's not, Trump is not a regular candidate. This is the infiltration of a Russian asset into the American political system. And this is the decision time. This is the moment at which Americans reject fascism. And if you go back to Nazi Germany in the early 30s and late 30s, if they were given the opportunity, if they had a show like this and the internet and enough press coverage that wasn't silenced, where they were warned, they obviously would have chosen their freedom.
So when you think about the strategy here, like what is the Harris campaign trying to accomplish? Why are they going on Fox? It's very interesting because what is Harris doing right now while we're talking? She is doing a big Republicans for Harris event in Pennsylvania. So this is her day, really, where she is talking to moderate Republicans who don't like Trump, those Haley voters. And she's doing it in Pennsylvania today with over 100 former Republican elected officials are with her right now. We're talking about Adam Kinzinger. We're talking about former Congressman Denver Riggleman. We're talking about multiple former congressmen. Elected officials from around the country have all descended, former generals, admirals, are all in Pennsylvania with her right now, addressing those Nikki Haley Republicans, telling them why they should vote for Harris. Then she's going to, after doing that, she's going to do Fox News.
Yeah.
So clearly this is she is making that because she knows if she can just peel off 2 or 3% of those Republicans, she's going to win.
It's a powerful strategy. And it's almost like reaching across the aisle, to coin a phrase, isn't it? And I think that is something that is different this time around. You know, I really like the idea that Democrats are very welcoming of never Trump Republicans. It doesn't work conversely.
More now than in 2020.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those in 2020.
Right.
And the reception wasn't the best. It was mixed. There were, like you're talking about, all of us guys, you know, Rick Wilson, Tim Miller, you know, all the Lincoln Project guys, Bill Kristol, all of us who came over in 2020. It was sort of like there was a lot of pushback for us. We can't trust these guys. We don't know what their motives are. You know, these guys aren't really with us. You know, they're asking us our stances on abortion and on Iraq. And it's just like, we were just like, wait a minute, we're here to help, guys. Can we have these fights later after we beat this guy? But that's not happening this time, which is great, because it's just sort of like, you know what, like now's not the time, you know.
Well, because there's a greater calling. You know, people understand that we are at this precipice, and it didn't feel like that last time. You know, people were like, oh, you don't want 4 more years of Trump, do you? But now we know about Project 2025. January 6th hadn't happened last time. Do you see what I mean? There are things now that have upped the stakes.
Yeah,
there it is. Listen, we have to take a very quick break, but I want to come back and talk more about Donald Trump rejecting these interviews that he had originally signed up for. He's changing the rules. We'll do that next here on Uncovered. Don't you wish you had a secret weapon? Something that always impresses, a recipe maybe, or even a piece of clothing? Well, a secret weapon is a great asset to have in your back pocket. It helps you get ahead in life, and that is how Mack Weldon thinks about clothing. As a secret weapon. Timeless, classic style that's infused with performance fabrics and hidden details. I love my Ace full-zip hooded sweatshirt in a charcoal heather grey. It keeps me warm, makes me feel more confident, because it's quality clothing. Mack Weldon apparel gives you understated good looks for understated confidence. Not flashy, just classic, always in style, and made from the world's most comfortable performance materials. Mack Weldon clothes are designed to fit your style and the demands of modern life. They look like regular clothes, but they feel like the latest in modern comfort. Get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mack Weldon. Go to mackweldon.com and get 25% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code UNCOVERED. That's MACKWELDON.com. Promo code UNCOVERED. And we're back. And don't forget, you can find links to our sponsors in the description below.
Can I talk about Mack Weldon for a second? For a second.
Did your costume arrive? Mine hasn't arrived.
Because I've never owned a flannel shirt in my life. Okay, people who know me know, like that's not me, right?
Yeah.
So, but I got one, and it looks very cool. And I figured since I just moved to Maine recently, you know, I need to have a flannel shirt. So
right. Yeah. Well, I already had one of these, so
you have had a flannel shirt.
No, because I ordered this hoodie, so I already had it. So I'm getting another one. So this is why I'm so overjoyed. We could just talk about the sponsor for the rest of the episode. I don't think they would have a problem with that at all.
We just turned into the Howard Stern show.
Right?
He did that for years. He would talk about for 20 minutes his sponsor.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to Trump kind of turning down these planned pre-booked interviews, and he just canceled one with CNBC. Let's take a quick look.
Well, Trump canceled, and he was going to come on. So, and I said, when you come on, we'll be able to say you came, and I didn't talk to him personally, but I said, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we should talk about the Bloomberg interview first, because this is really what has kind of set it off. He's done a couple of interviews now. He also made that economic speech in Detroit at the Detroit Economic Center or whatever it was.
Economic Club of Chicago.
Economic Club of Chicago, I apologize. And it was so bad that it really kind of started, it must have started like a firestorm backstage amongst his advisors, because he had absolutely nothing to offer. His only economic policy is tariffs, and he doesn't even give a straight answer on what the percentage. He goes 10%, 20%, 50%, 1,000%, 2,000%, and I'm like, which percent are we going to land on today? And that is very dangerous, isn't it? To be so frivolous with the language when it comes to actual economic policy that could potentially bankrupt the country. That's what the economists are saying. And that's why it was so weird that he would go on Bloomberg, and I'll show a clip of this, with the Bloomberg news editor, and basically claim that this guy, who is an economist, a British one, I must say, doesn't know what he's talking about and was wrong. Let's take a quick look.
She came out, she just said, the Green New Scam. She just named all these things.
But President Trump, the issue the markets are looking at the fact you are making all these promises. Latest one was car loans. You're flooding the thing with giving giveaways.
But we're going to grow.
I was actually quite kind to you. I used 7 trillion. The upper estimate is 15 trillion. People like the Wall Street Journal, who's hardly a communist organization,
yeah, but you don't know.
They have criticized you on this as well. You are running up enormous debts.
What does the Wall Street Journal know? I'm meeting with them tomorrow. What does the Wall Street Journal know? They've been wrong about everything. So have you, by the way. You've been wrong about
You're trying to turn this. You're trying to turn this.
You've been wrong about
it. No, you're trying to turn this into debate. There are business people. There are business
you're wrong.
people.
You've been wrong all your life on this stuff. You've been.
Trump's body language became very interesting there. Did you see the way he kind of sat back and folded his arms to give the impression that it was like the shutters had come down? What did you feel about this, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, it was a mess. I really think that's the last serious interview Trump's going to do.
Yeah.
He canceled the CNBC interview at the same time. He did the same day he did this one. This one had been scheduled way ahead of time. He even talked about at the beginning he mentioned that he thought about pulling out of this one, but I don't think he felt that he could. There was just so many, it would have looked so bad. There were so many people committed. But yes, this is a serious journalist. He's the top guy at Bloomberg. He asked him serious economic questions. These are all business people in the audience. Now, Trump had his fans there cheering his every answer, no matter how ridiculous or inane. He had his cheering section there to try and sort of drown things out, but it was a mess. I mean, this guy pointed out that you've promised massive tax cuts across the board, corporate tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, deduct car loan interest, all of these things you promised is going to blow a hole in a $7.5 trillion hole in the deficit, which is already big. And he said, how are you going to make up for all the revenue shortfalls from your tax cuts? But Trump's only answer is tariffs, that he's going to get it all back in tariffs, which is insane. It's not possible, completely impossible for you to raise anything close to that amount in tariffs. Plus, these business people, these corporate people know that starting an international trade war with the EU and China is going to crush their companies. And Trump just continues to answer over and over in these interviews, we just need to start making stuff here. And he's confronted with like, well, what about companies that like get parts for the things that they're manufacturing here? Their parts are coming in from all over the world. Like iPhones have parts from like 70 different countries. What about that? And he says, well, they just need to start learning how to make that stuff here. We can make everything here. And it's like he wants to go back to like the 1800s, like a mercantilist system. And it's just not going to happen. It's not going to work. So do I think he's going to actually do any? I guess he probably is. And he thinks he can do it by executive order. The bottom line is what Trump is proposing would be an absolute disaster and would cause the Great Depression that he has been predicting for the last 4 years that never happened. It actually would, because this is exactly some of the policies that led to the Great Depression last time in 1932.
He has no idea how America works. He has no idea about international trade, let alone diplomacy.
No, he does not.
He has no concept. And this is because he's never been a great businessman. He has always played the role of a businessman, as we've discussed many, many times. It's an acting job for him. In the same way that, when I ever saw him in the Oval Office doing presidenting, I could tell that he was pretending to do it, that he was like going through the motions, but he wasn't ever in the room himself. He was never really present. He probably couldn't believe deep inside that he was ever given that job in the first place. It would be so dangerous, not just for the American economy, but as we know, America sneezes, the world catches a cold. That's how it works. That's how the subprime mortgage crash happened in 2007, 2008. Like this is the problem. It starts here and it will just carry on.
So how about this?
Go on.
Trump is critical of, let me, two more points. Trump is critical of these companies manufacturing things or parts of their stuff overseas. Trump has sold over the last 30 years hundreds and hundreds of products. Board games, mattresses, vodka, vitamins,
Ties,
you name it.
Shirts.
Bibles, t-shirt. None of them are made in the United States. Everything Trump sells is manufactured in other places. So that's number one. He's a total hypocrite on this. He has never focused on selling made in the USA products. He's never done that. He's never talked about doing that. He gets his Bibles from China because he gets them for $3. And if he had them printed in the United States, they might cost $7.
But even the MAGA hat, I mean, that's the branded MAGA hat is like the symbol of Trumpism is made in China.
He also was asked to give an example, and he gave an example of John Deere. He said John Deere he gave an example of how his tariffs helped American workers and the American company. The example, he claimed that John Deere, he slapped a tariff on tractors from other countries, and he threatened them with a tariff. And he said they were going to move some plants and some manufacturing to Mexico, but he slapped the tariff on or threatened the tariff, and they didn't do it. They backed down. John Deere, which does not want to get involved in politics in any way, they want to sell their shit to Democrats and Republicans, actually took the unusual step of issuing a statement today to say that is a complete fabrication. Wow. They have no idea what he's talking about. He completely made up the John Deere story.
He was also asked how he would save money, and he brought up that old story about the Air Force One. It was the only thing he could think of. He was like, well,
how are you going to cut government spending?
How are you going to cut government spending? And he goes, well, they had this order and it was going to be for like $6 billion for Air Force One. It's not one plane. It's two planes, by the way. Like, he's trying to be cool with any info that he can. The reality was he canceled the Boeing contract. I'll just say this very quickly. There were two Russian Boeing 747s that had been built by Boeing for a Russian airline that went bust, and they were sitting around doing nothing. He decided to buy those two cheap, but now Boeing have to convert them into military planes because Air Force One is not a passenger jet. It is a military aircraft. And the cost, so even though he got those two planes cheap, the cost of converting those is now up to the $6 billion and more than the original cost of these two planes being built from scratch. And he cannot get his head around that.
And he spent more hours on those planes than as president than he did on probably anything else, probably on COVID, because he's obsessed with things like that. The color scheme, the interior design, the furniture, everything. He spent countless hours on those planes because that's what Trump cares about. The trappings of the office, the making him look like the king, which is why when he got voted out of office, he spent the next year and a half outfitting his old jalopy plane down in Louisiana to make it look as close to Air Force One as possible.
Apparently, he also redecorated his office in Mar-a-Lago to look like the Oval Office.
Right. Because that's what Trump really cares about.
He's a fake president. He's an actor. He's just an actor. Ironically, Ronald Reagan was an actor and did a better job. some might say. Okay, let's continue down this road. I want to talk about pushback from journalists, because we've criticized Jake Tapper a bit for his efforts, especially in that first debate where there was no pushback on Trump's lies. But this time he's actually done quite a good job with Youngkin. That's right. This is an interesting one. I'll show the clip and then we can talk about it.
In fact, had senior people from our national security apparatus say that there's 15,000 violent felons in the United States. They have no idea where they are. That is what I believe the president is referring to. I don't think that he's referring to elected people in America. But I'm
literally reading his quotes. I'm literally reading his quotes to you, and I played them earlier so you could hear that they were not made up by me. He's literally talking about, quote, radical left lunatics, and then one of those lunatics he mentioned was Congressman Adam Schiff. Criminals should be locked up. Migrants who are in this country illegally, who are violent, should be locked up and deported. I grant you all of that, and I am not denying that it's happening at all. But I'm talking about Donald Trump saying that he wants to use the National Guard and the military to go after the left. That's what he's saying.
I don't believe that's what he's saying. But listen, you and I are going to argue about that. But I would suggest if you would also.
I played the quote and I read it to you.
If you would also balance
can wish that he weren't saying that, but that's what he's saying.
Jake, all the time people are taking little snippets of content and turning it into a big narrative. I think.
So let's talk about this, because the subject really is the issue at hand here, and that is that Donald Trump has come out and said that he would use the National Guard or even the U.S. military against American citizens who. I mean, what was the point that he was making? That didn't vote for him, or that didn't like him, or didn't agree with his politics? I mean, this is pretty outlandish language, isn't it?
Yeah, and I thought, there were two interviews that happened. I think they were both CNN. They were almost back to back, and I thought it just so perfectly illustrated this point, which was the Mark Esper interview and the Youngkin interview that we just saw. Because Mark Esper went on there and was asked about this too, and said, do you think he's just joking around? Do you think this is hyperbolic? He's just being, talking junk? And he said, no, absolutely not. He said, I think that people need to take these comments very seriously. I think Trump means what he's saying. Now, this is Trump's own Secretary of Defense, who knows Trump a hell of a lot better than Glenn Youngkin will ever know Trump. Youngkin knows nothing about Trump. He never was behind the scenes with Trump. He never spent any time in a room with Trump. He never heard Trump rage at people. Esper did. Yeah. Okay. He knows. And Esper is saying Trump is not joking when he says this stuff. So then you have the people like the Youngkins and the Haleys and the Chris Sununos and
falling
all
in
of
line.
These old guard establishment Republicans, Karl Rove, we could go on and on and on, who when you confront them with Trump's threats and his dictator comments and his autocrat comments, they do what Youngkin just did, which is, oh, you're taking him out of context. He doesn't really mean that. You're just playing a snippet here or a snippet there, because they don't believe that he is going to do this stuff. And that's why they're going to vote for him. And that's the infuriating, frustrating thing to those of us who really do know Trump, who spend a lot of time studying him and listening to him, because we understand this is not the man who took office in 2017. As bad as he was then, he is so much worse now. He's on a revenge and retribution tour, and he does not have anyone who is going to go in there with him this time who is going to stop him. There will be no Glenn Youngkins in the Trump administration.
Or Mark Milley's, who has come out, or we've heard this week in Bob Woodward's latest book, that he has referred to Donald Trump as a fascist. And that is the former Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, this is the
appointed
issue.
By Trump.
Appointed by Trump.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the former Secretary of Defense making these claims.
Do you fear that he would try to utilize the National Guard, the military, against U.S. citizens?
Yes, I do, of course, because I lived through that. And I saw over the summer of 2020 where President Trump and those around him wanted to use the National Guard in various capacities in cities such as Chicago and Portland and Seattle. And of course, there was a moment in time, as you just described, where he, on that early date in June, where he wanted to bring in active duty military as well. So that's what equally concerns me about his comment would be the use of the military in these types of things. Now, the good news is I don't believe he has the authority under the law to use the military unless there was some type of civil disobedience or insurrection, in which case that would be use of the Insurrection Act. But otherwise, these other roles that he's described in the past are law enforcement, and that is prescribed under the Posse Comitatus Act, so he would not be able to use it. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but this would be a good discussion to have. But my sense is his inclination is to use the military in these situations, whereas my view is that that's a bad role for the military. It should only be law enforcement taking those actions.
So, I mean, this is very serious, isn't it? And it would be foolish for us or for anybody not to take it extremely seriously when the former defense secretary under Donald Trump and the former Joint Chief of Staff is saying the same thing, that this guy is extremely dangerous and effectively an enemy of the United States.
So we have the governor of Virginia who wants to say, like, no, that's not really what Trump doesn't mean any of that. That's not. And yet Trump's own former Secretary of Defense says, no, he absolutely intends to do this. He means this. You know, the only quibble I would have with Esper is talking about the Posse Comitatus Act and the Constitution and the law. Trump doesn't care about any of that stuff. No. And he's going to make sure that the upper echelons of the military are wiped out, and he's going to put generals in there who are going to be people like Michael Flynn, not like Mark Milley, and they're not going to stop him. And so that's really going to become the question. And is the Supreme Court going to stop him? Is anybody going to stop him? Look, another perfect example of that is this morning in his town hall, where Trump was asked, well, how can a president stop trans athletes from playing in a women's sports league in Idaho? How can a president do that? He said, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to ban it. Yeah. Like, well, how can you tell a sports league who can play and who can? President has the power. I'll just do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
he keeps talking about presidential power. Yeah. He cares because he doesn't care about the protocols of writing a bill, it going to Congress, it being ratified in the Senate. Like, the process is irrelevant to him. He thinks that the president has absolute power. That's right. And the fact that he's saying that out loud, and the fact that we spoke last week about how he did so many executive orders and they really should just be saved for special occasions. But he doesn't care about any of the guardrails and protocols that are in place. He thinks that the president is akin to being a god. Yeah. And we know that. And again, you know,
this said it many times himself.
Right. And that's why I keep going back to 1930s Germany. And I hate to keep saying this because it sounds like it's misplaced, but it really isn't. Like, this time there is a warning. This is the warning. This conversation we're having now is the warning. And you speak to anybody who has experience, family members who lived through what Germany lived through, and they will tell you that if they had the opportunity to, because Hitler was elected, he was duly elected, and this is the problem. It is invariably with a lot of these despots, they are populists, they play nice initially, they get elected, and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, but the Germans never got a second chance. Hitler was never removed from power and then brought back.
Right.
We have a second chance here to stop this.
Yeah. Well, he did go to prison for a year, actually, after the.
I'm talking about after he became chancellor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so this is why we have to know our history, because it should inform our decisions. And we are 2 weeks away from a vote that is going to change America and the rest of the world completely if Donald Trump was to secure the presidency. And that is not a partisan statement. And that is what people really struggle to understand in this country. They think you say anything negative about a Republican, that it is, it's pure partisan politics. And it isn't. It's a public service announcement.
And, people ask me all the time, like, that. This is why I despise people like Youngkin and Sununu and Haley more than like Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene. I honestly despise them more because I know what Matt Gaetz thinks and Marjorie. I know where they're coming from. I get it. Like, they're all in on this.
Yeah.
They actually like, they believe that Trump is going to do this stuff and they like it. Right. So I get where they're coming from. But Youngkin, like these people like him who say, oh, no, you know, he's just talking nonsense. He's not going to do it.
Yeah.
That's what really infuriates me.
Well, those are people who take democracy for granted or really don't care for it at all, ultimately. And we've heard a lot of this from Republicans and senior Republicans that, you know, we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. And that's why it seems that for some people, the fall of democracy is actually not that important to them. And this really is the true test. This 2 and 3 weeks that we have left is the true test of what America chooses. You mentioned Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor who twice lied to the FBI, we know, and then was pardoned by Donald Trump in the last week of his presidency. He has a conspiracy theory as he goes on Roseanne Barr's podcast, claiming that it was actually the deep state that was responsible for the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life. Let's take a quick look.
Times what we're seeing happen is we're seeing these people, they're trying to do damn near anything. I mean, they're trying to kill this, they're trying to kill Trump. I mean, two assassinations. The first one almost turned his head into red mist, They
wanted it televised too. That was that was the only time they televised it.
Right. I mean, you got the whole thing, the New York Times reporter and right there in the front with this high-speed camera. You got CNN's on there. And, even on this one at the golf course, I understood that MSNBC was there. Like, what? Wow. I mean, how does this kind of stuff happen? So the fact is there was 2 assassination attempts on Trump. There likely going to be another.
There were more than that.
Oh, yeah. Well, the CIA should be all over that. Probably my guess is you won't hear nothing about it. But my guess is he was working for them as well. I'm speculating a bit, but he definitely was working and on the radar of the FBI. So, and then the other guy, and then they're in these commercials for BlackRock. I mean, all of these things that you look at, they in the world that they should have been where they were, yet they were able to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
So, if you study, which I have, like the various assassinations of the 60s, even when you look at Ronald Reagan's, the assassination attempt on him. I mean, you look at these assassinations of presidents and other individuals, other high-profile individuals. It's never what you see. It's never what you're told.
He was a senior figure in the military, and I don't know what changed with that guy. Maybe nothing changed. Maybe he was always like that.
Yeah, I think he was always a little nutty. And he always had a few issues, but there's a lot of people. If you're in the military, you're given orders, you're given a specific job to do, and you do it, and that doesn't mean that you can do well in the political arena. But the point is that this is the man that the national security advisor of the United States is one of the most important positions in the U.S. government, one of the most sensitive. They have the most highly classified, sensitive information. In this country, they have access to all of it, and they see and hear all of it. Everything that the intelligence community has goes through the national security advisor. And this was the man that Donald Trump felt was the most qualified person in the United States to be in that position. And Barack Obama told him, Trump has talked about this many times, that one of the things that when Barack Obama said, I'm going to give you one piece of advice, whatever you do, get away from Michael Flynn, because Flynn was involved in Trump's campaign. Do not appoint this man as your national security advisor. I know you're planning on doing it. I'm just going to give you one piece of advice. Don't do it. This guy's dirty. And Trump did it anyway. And look what happened. It was a disaster. We found out he was in the pocket of the Russians, which of course he denies. But
this is why Trump. This is because Trump was dirty.
But now right. But now Trump has talked about bringing him back in a very senior role in the administration. Flynn has talked about that he's going to be back. And here you have him talking about this week that the networks and the New York Times were in on this, that they knew that someone was going to start shooting at Trump, and they had their people there to cover it live because they wanted it, because they knew about it ahead of time. This is Donald Trump's former national security advisor. He's absolutely batshit crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I posted a clip of him a couple years ago where he said that the government was secretly putting the COVID vaccine in salad dressing to sneak it into people. This was Donald Trump's national security advisor.
And of course, he's been doing this, is it called the Reawaken America tour, where he goes up and down the country organizing these events. Often,
I call it the QAnon Roadshow.
The QAnon Roadshow, where he gets pastors and communities, church communities, and they're basically pushing this far-right Christian nationalist view of America. I didn't realize, I only read it a couple of days ago, that J.D. Vance converted to Catholicism in 2019.
Yeah, he did. He was an atheist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because he wanted to run for Senate. That's when he decided that he wanted to run for Senate, because he was toying with the idea of running in 2020 and decided not to. And so he was doing some things that he felt you needed to do, because you can't run for anything as a Republican atheist. It's just not going to happen.
Well, especially if you've got people like Peter Thiel behind you, and who are very already deeply entrenched in this Christian nationalism.
Yeah,
it's like,
so I don't believe he's a Catholic. He's no more Catholic than Donald Trump is. That's just something he did for politics. That's what I believe.
Let's talk about the Apprentice movie. This is the film that Donald Trump has tried to sue to get shut down, and I think it's just hit the cinemas right now. Trump posted a kind of late night angry rant about it. I'll just give it a read for those who are listening on the audio podcast. Trump posted a fake and classless movie written about me called The Apprentice. Do they even have the right to use that name without approval? Will hopefully bomb. It's cheap, defamatory, and politically disgusting hatchet job put out right before the 2024 presidential election to try and hurt the greatest political movement in the history of our country, Make America Great Again. My former wife, Ivana, was a kind and wonderful person, and I had a great relationship with her until the day she died. The writer of this pile of garbage, Gabe Sherman, a lowlife and talentless hack who has long been widely discredited, knew that, but chose to ignore it. So sad that human scum, like the people involved in this hopefully unsuccessful enterprise, are allowed to say and do whatever they want in order to hurt a political movement which is far bigger than any of us. MAGA 2024, says Donald Trump.
There's three things about this. First of all, he posted that at like 12:14 a.m.
Yeah.
So that's when he seems to be doing his rage tweeting these days, is between midnight and 2 a.m., which is very healthy. So that's the first thing, is the timing. The second thing is, he says he hopes it will bomb. You don't go out there and say, this is horrible, this is terrible, they're saying all these terrible things about me. That's a way to get people to want to watch it. It's like, don't look at that over there, it's really horrible. Oh, I need to go check that out. I mean, it's the dumbest way. If you want to hope something flops, you ignore it. You don't talk about it. That's what you do, but what does he do? He spotlights it and highlights it. So for Democrats, who a lot of people are probably like, oh, I'm not going to see that. I don't want to sit through a movie about Donald Trump for 2 hours. Then they hear him say that and they're like, whoa, well, I need to check this out. This sounds pretty good if it made him that mad. But then the third thing is, like, I've seen a bunch of clips from the movie. I haven't seen the whole thing, but I really thought that the part that Trump would object to the most was where they emphasized that, like, Roy Cohn, transferred his entire life philosophy onto Trump, and that he was the biggest influence in Trump's life, because Roy Cohn was a complete piece of garbage and a dirtbag. He was counsel for the House Un-American Affairs Committee under Joseph McCarthy. He was the committee counsel, and so Roy Cohn is just scum. He was one of the worst human beings ever.
He's like a gangster, and he's brilliantly portrayed by Jeremy Strong in the movie.
Yeah, so I thought that Trump would object to that and say, no, Cohn really wasn't that big of an influence on me. But obviously he doesn't talk about Cohn, but he still obviously likes him, because he didn't say a word about that.
Yeah.
What he objected to most was the Ivana part of the movie, about, the fact that Ivana alleged in their divorce proceeding in 1989 that Trump raped her, that Trump at one point sexually assaulted her, I think after they separated. And years later, he got her to sign a statement recanting that, of course, which that's Trump's MO. He goes after these women who are his victims and gets them to sign statements. They got Stormy Daniels to do the same thing, saying, no, this didn't happen, either by threat or by paying them money or giving them something that they really want.
Or both.
That's what Trump does. And he did that with Ivana. So it was interesting to see that was the part of the movie that really bothered him the most.
The trailer looks really interesting, actually, because, normally we don't see that kind of side of Donald Trump. And so, yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. It's called The Apprentice, if they even have the rights to use that word. The guy's such an idiot. Let's go to Florida now and talk about Ron DeSantis. Florida has obviously been suffering in the last two hurricanes significantly, but this story is actually more about the abortion law there, as DeSantis' office has produced a report claiming that the signatures used to get the abortion rights amendment on the ballot next month are invalid. And you kind of posted about this, and you wrote a piece about this. Just tell us in your own words kind of how this has come about and how this will play out.
Yeah, I've been warning that this is coming for a long time. It doesn't seem like national media is paying no attention to this, really. Florida media is, but not national. That Ron DeSantis, as I know very well, does not respect democracy, as we've seen. And he will do anything he can to stop the democratic process if it goes against what he wants, either by threats or force or using the levers of government power. So we know he opposes the abortion amendment. First, he tried to get his appointees on the Supreme Court to reject it because the language was supposedly vague. They didn't go along with that, and he raged at them. Then he launched an investigation of the signatures, questioning in Democratic areas, questioning whether some of the signatures were valid or not.
Which is a terrible thing to do, we should say. I mean, to even consider claiming that signatures are not are ingenuine is so offensive.
He doesn't ever question the signatures on any Republican initiative or candidate petitions. So he did this in heavily Democratic areas. Then he had his law enforcement agency send a letter threatening to prosecute television station owners if they ran commercials in favor of the amendment. That is going to court tomorrow because that group filed for a restraining order against Ron DeSantis because maybe some of these stations are not running the ad now. I don't know, after he threatened to prosecute them. So he's doing everything that he possibly can. And to knock down this amendment, he also had his state health agency put out an ad saying, talking against the abortion. He put out economic impact statement, which was bogus, claiming that this amendment, if passed, would cost taxpayers money. So he's doing everything he can using taxpayer funds illegally and using the levers of government to try and rig this vote. And as it is, it has to get 60% to pass. So it's not easy to pass this. But it's polling just over 60%. So this latest thing, what he's now done is he's now released a report where he claims that 16% of the signatures to get this on the ballot were forged or shady or questionable. Now, it's probably too late for him to use this report to do anything about it now. But what I predict he's going to do is, of course, if the amendment doesn't pass, gets 59%, whatever, he's going to be all happy and he defeated it. But if it does pass, he is going to use this investigation to challenge the validity of the vote and try and get it overturned. That's what he's going to do.
He is a truly terrible person. And this, because it's an extremist. It's like a far-right extremist mindset. And that, we've seen this in a whole bunch of Republican governors. And it's so frustrating because the point that it makes to me more than anything is that the threat to democracy is not just Trump.
No.
We're seeing these people get empowered by Donald Trump, and now they're taking it into their own hands.
Yeah, and in many ways, people like him and people like Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton in Texas are more dangerous because, Trump is like an undisciplined child when he doesn't like something, and he throws temper tantrums and makes a lot of mistakes along the way of trying to defeat something. These guys are more sinister and smarter and more calculating in how they go at things and try and defeat it. And so that's why in many respects, Ron DeSantis is more dangerous than Trump. But the DeSantis problem is trying to get elected nationally is a challenge for somebody as unlikable as him.
And that's just the cowboy boots.
Yeah.
The rest of it you can keep. Okay, we have to finish in a second, but I want to end with this Coachella story. Firstly, why is Donald Trump campaigning in California? I mean, what's his thinking?
Yeah, his campaign people were asked about this, and they said it's not really about winning California. They're trying to make some kind of a statement to the country as a whole that he's wants to be the president for everybody and go after every vote, which is all nonsense.
Yeah.
What I said is, what I said ahead of time was he just wants to be able to brag years from now that, or even at the present, that he had more fans at Coachella than the music festival did. That's crowd size is important to him. So, but the thing is, we've seen this before. Whenever he holds rallies at remote locations, he's done this before. He will provide transportation for a lot of these people one way.
Yep.
He doesn't pay for your return trip.
Right.
And so he will pay for buses to bus people from different places to these areas. And then he just lets them figure out their own way of getting back. And we have seen this with other rallies. And that's what he did. There you see all these people, they came in 20 bus loads of people were brought there, and there were no 20 buses to take them back at the end of the night. So they're stranded in the middle of the desert. And this is classic Trump.
Here it is. It's pretty dark, this clip, so turn up your brightness.
Look at this. There's chicks that are organizing this that are failing.
Look at all of us.
If you can just, yeah, we're going to walk with you.
There's supposed to be like 20 buses here, and there's one. Everyone's starting to freak out. And there's people that go down this street for I don't know how long.
That's Donald Trump all over, isn't it? Basically, it's like, bring him in, set up the show. It's all a production. And then he clears off and doesn't care what happens to people. I mean, that really is very much the theme of his former presidency, the way he's run his businesses. This is who he is. And
you just wonder, with some of these people, like, is it ever going to sink in to some of these cultists that he really doesn't give a shit about you?
Yeah.
Like, what more do you have to see to know that he does? He's held rallies this campaign in 104-degree heat outdoors in the middle of Arizona in July, and people are dropping like flies.
Yeah,
we just saw at his town hall the other day with the sundown incident.
Yep.
People are dropping like flies because it was so hot. So he doesn't care about these people. Somebody passed out at one of his rallies, and somebody was calling for water. And it was right in front of the stage, and Trump reaches down and gets his water from on the podium. And I thought, oh, he's going to hand the water down to this person. And he took a drink of it himself and stood there. This is Donald Trump. And I don't understand for the life of me, none of us do, how these cultists don't see what's obvious to everybody else.
Yeah. Well, it's all in the book, The Cult of Trump. Just so you know, there are academics who've kind of studied this and worked it out. It's not an anomaly. It's not in our wheelhouse necessarily, but there is a whole thing about the coercion and the mind control, and these people, they love to feel seen, and I think that's what Donald Trump gives them. But I just want to caveat at the very end of this conversation, Ron, is that I still maintain he is a fringe candidate. He's a minority candidate. And I just don't think that there is the support for him on a national level. And, you know, I'm not predicting and I'm touching wood and all that stuff, but I'm just saying that I think the big shock will be that people have been so caught up by the Donald Trump PR machine. Remember, he's the one who tells us how popular he is. And that in reality, when it comes down to the vote, he's just not as famous as he thinks he is. And people are just not going to do it. I have faith in the American public.
Polls don't vote. You know, it's about people showing up.
Yeah.
You know, polls don't vote. You could poll whatever, 50%, but you still got to get those people to show up and vote for you.
Right. So that's the lesson of today's sermon is get out the vote and take your neighbors with you. And please make every effort to do so. This is our one final chance, really, at this. Ron, we have to finish, but thanks again. As always, the audio podcast will drop later tonight if you'd like to listen. You can rewind and watch the show again, share and comment down below. Don't forget our sponsor down there too. And as the election edges ever closer, we'll return next Wednesday and do more Uncovered here on the Midas Touch Network. Thanks a lot, Ron.
You got it. See you next week.